It is time for yet another faction codex review. We've done the Black Templars, the Dark Angels, and the Space Wolves, so I figured we would give the Sons of Sanguinius their turn in the spotlight, and so today we are going to be taking a look at the Blood Angels Codex, going through their detachments, their datasheets, and all of their rules and abilities, and see what is worth taking in their book. Now, the Blood Angels get 3 detachments in their codex, as well as the extra one from the Grotmus releases. But as ever, we start with their main army rule, which, like all Marines, is Oath of Moment. This grants you those wonderful rerolls to hit against an enemy unit that you pick each battle round. It is great for Blood Angels because it is both ranged and melee, and the Blood Angels can hit very, very hard in melee. So just making sure you get the absolute most out of your attacks and getting them through to that vital wound step, and it really does allow you to punch up quite massively into even the toughest targets with the sheer weight of dice and the quality of the attacks that you can throw out. Now, you won't be getting the +1 to wound bonus that you get if you are running a non-unique chapter, because if you are running Blood Angels, you do have enough good unique units and characters that you are going to be wanting to take them, so you won't get the +1 to wound, but I think the trade-off of getting those units like Sanguinary Guard and some of your really good characters does still balance that out quite well. In terms of your unique detachments, as mentioned, there are 4 in total for the Blood Angels, and we start with the Liberator Assault Group. This is your index one. It's been slightly tweaked a little bit, but it's generally the basic main one that can have good use with almost any unit in your codex. The main detachment rule is the Red Thirst, and this means that when you charge into combat, you get +1 to your attacks and +2 to your strength. So bumping even something like a standard Assault Intercessor up to 5 strength 6 attacks with their chainswords, and that can just make them incredibly effective in terms of the amount of dice they can throw down, as well as potentially getting you to some key breakpoints to make it much easier to wound your opponent. So it's a very rewarding, very fun rule to have on an army that is going to be moving up the board and charging into the enemy as quickly as possible. Things like Power Fists on your Aggressors and your Terminators will now be Strength 10, which is a huge breakpoint, allowing them to go into Toughness 5 enemies much more reliably, but now also being a much scarier anti-vehicle threat on any of those Toughness 9 tanks and monsters. It is just all around a great rule, and it will come into play a lot when you are running the Blood Angels because you are going to be charging a lot. For the enhancements on offer in this detachment, you get Speed of the Primarch, which grants you the fantastically strong once per battle ability of Fights First on the bearer and his unit. It is 25 points, so it's not super cheap, but it is unbelievably strong, and it can easily let you turn the tide of a battle if you use it at the right moment to kill off a vital enemy unit before they can swing into you. So I do honestly think you will see this one taken in most games just for that super strong, admittedly one-use effect. Rage-Fueled Warrior is also 25 points. This one grants the bearer sustained hits 3 once per battle. So I would say overall it's maybe a bit less good than Speed of the Primarch, but sustained hits 3 can be very scary on some characters, turning things like your Death Company Captain's Power Fists to a sustained hits 3, strength 10, -2 AP, 2 damage profile with 6 attacks on the charge means on average you could be getting over 10 hits with Oath of Moment rerolls into a target, so he can potentially wipe out entire units all by himself if you're lucky. The Icon of the Angel is a cheaper 20 points. This forces an enemy unit, not a monster or vehicle, that wants to fall back from the bearer's engagement range to take a desperate escape test as though they were battle shocked. And then if they were already battle shocked, the test is at -1. So this potentially lets you kill off a actually good chunk of an enemy unit that doesn't want to be in combat with you and is trying to fall back. It's a pretty solid ability, but it can be a bit niche unless you really can guarantee you can get into a unit that will definitely not want to be in combat with you and will definitely want to fall back rather than just keep fighting. And then finally, the Gift of Foresight is a cheaper 15 points. This one is once per battle round. After you make a hit, a wound, or a saving throw, you can change that result to an unmodified 6. So guaranteeing you some critical hits or some critical wounds. If you've got dev wounds on a weapon, this can of course be very strong, or you can just use it to keep your character alive a bit longer with that guaranteed 6 on their save. So it's relatively nice, it's relatively cheap, and it definitely will get a lot of use on your characters over the course of a battle. The 6 stratagems for this detachment have a really nice bit of choice in them, with a decision you can make to buff them a little bit whilst forcing your unit to become battle shocked, so it can add a tiny bit of tactical depth to your decision making. But we start with Angelic Grace. This one grants your unit in any phase after you've been allocated a mortal wound a 5-up feel no pain against mortal wounds. So for any psychic or other mortal wound style attacks that are going into your unit, this can just help to keep your Marines alive as you get them up the board. It's not always going to be useful, it's not always going to be used because some armies don't have that much mortal wound output, but it is a great layer of defense to have in your back pocket, and against some matchups, this will be really, really useful to have. Red Rampage is done in the fight phase. You get to pick either lance or lethal hits for a unit that hasn't fought yet, and their melee weapons get one of those rules. You can instead to give in to the Red Thirst and become battle shocked, which is the choice that I mentioned earlier, and then your unit gains both lance and lethal hits. So if you are charging in for one command point, you can just obliterate most targets. Now it does impact your OC of course and any other strats that you wanted to use on the unit, so there is a downside, but if you just need to kill a unit outright, this could be well worth going for to get those lethal hits and that lance, so you are auto wounding on 6s, and also your regular wound rolls are going to be at +1. Armor of Contempt is still here. We're not going to go into it in any great depth. It's another solid, useful defensive strat to have as you are moving up the board on your Marines. Aggressive Onslaught is the next unique one. It's actually really strong. For one command point, it allows you in your movement phase, after a unit has advanced, to give the unit the ability to either shoot or charge after it's advanced. So that's not bad. Getting you some extra shooting after you've advanced or getting off that charge after you've advanced is really strong. If you want to get the most out of it, you can again fall to the Red Thirst, and then you get to both shoot and charge after you've advanced. I think generally you're not going to need both of those going off, so I think this is one where you probably won't be falling to the Red Thirst all that often. Most things I think you're going to be using this on is going to be a unit that you've got up, you want to get into combat as soon as possible, so you just don't fall into the Red Thirst, you just get advance and charge on a unit. But there are some units where they've got some slightly better shooting, so maybe you do want them to move up, get some shooting off, and then still get a charge off. So you could fall to the Red Thirst in those situations, but I would say probably 90% of the time, you will just be using this on a unit that you either want to get up and get a charge off, so you get that extra D6 inches of movement from the advance, or maybe a unit that you want to get onto an objective and then still do some shooting, and just go for the advance and shoot side of it if they've got nothing that they want to charge. Next up, we have Savage Echoes. This is also one command point. This one is done in the opponent's charge phase, and you put this on a unit that got charged, and this is essentially a form of your detachment rule in reverse. So you get either +1 to your strength or your attacks on the unit that was charged, or once again, you can fall to the Red Thirst, and then you get to pick both. So if you just need one of them, maybe getting that bump to strength 5 instead of strength 4, you could just go for that. But I think generally, if you are being charged and you want to fight off an enemy unit, you're probably going to go for both unless you really, really need another stratagem, or you don't want to lose your OC on an objective. But going for both does get you that +1 strength and attack, which can be incredibly helpful for fighting off an enemy. And I think this combos really well with a character that has the speed of the Primarch, meaning that even if you get charged, you can swing into the enemy unit that charged you with those fairly nice buffs and potentially kill them off before they even get to swing. Finally, you also get Relentless Assault, which you use after a unit in your army has fallen back in your movement phase. This simply allows you to shoot or charge after falling back, or once more you can fall to the Red Thirst and then you can do both. So falling back and shooting is great on some of your more shooter units, but being able to fall back and then still charge either into another unit or just back into the same unit is so good in this detachment, because of course your detachment bonus relies on you getting that charge off. So being able to freely fall back and then charge back in to get that extra strength and attack is incredibly strong to have. And I imagine, like Aggressive Onslaught, you'll probably only be using this for one of those things. You probably won't need to fall to the Red Thirst all that time, because if it's a shooter unit, you'll just want them to shoot, fall back and shoot. If it's a melee unit, you'll want them to fall back and charge. There aren't that many units where it's going to be worth falling to the Red Thirst just to get their shooting and their charging back in again. So I think overall they're a really strong set of stratagems and a really great set of enhancements. They make your already punchy units even more terrifying, whether you are charging or you are being charged, and it is just a solid all-rounded detachment. If you want a nice mixture of units in your army, they will all get at least some benefit out of these rules. The next detachment on offer is for those that have fallen to the Black Rage. The Lost Brethren are all about your Death Company, and their detachment rule, a noble death in combat, gives your Death Company units the ability to re-roll wound rolls of 1 if your unit is below starting strength, or re-roll all of their wound rolls if they are below half strength. So it makes you much deadlier even as you start to lose models, and it's definitely going to make them a scary prospect for an enemy to damage you but not quite finish you off, because they will then know they've got some very, very painful attacks coming back their way. You also get a nice extra bonus in that you get battle line keyword on your Death Company Marines and the bolt rifle variant of them, so just helping you to play that objective game a bit better and score more points if you are running a pure Death Company army. Equally good are your 4 enhancements. All of these are Death Company model only, of course, but they really can boost your output in combat. Sanguinius' Grace is 20 points. This allows you once per battle at the end of the phase to fight again with the bearer. So as long as he's survived the enemy attacks back and is in engagement range of 3 or more enemy models, he gets to swing again. Of course, having to be in engagement range of 3 or more enemy models means that this is pretty much only going to be used against enemy infantry rather than monsters or tanks or vehicles, but being able to essentially double your output is so good, and it really can let something like a Death Company captain just annihilate an entire infantry unit all by themselves if you need them to. Bloodshard is a pricier 25 points. This is a standard return the bearer back after he's destroyed rule, so you roll a d6 after the bearer is destroyed, and on a 2+ he comes back. This is done at the end of the phase like they usually are, and he comes back with 3 wounds remaining. So it can put you at risk of being charged and just killed off again, but if you are going into your turn, if it's the end of the fight phase when your bearer dies, this can easily set you up for a charge into an enemy unit in your turn and get the enemy straight onto the back foot again as you've charged in with a character they thought they'd dealt with. To slay the War Master is 15 points and is once per battle. This one allows the bearer to pick an enemy character they're in engagement range of and roll 6d6, and on each 4+ you do a mortal wound to them. So on average it's only 3 mortals, but it could be up to 6 if you are lucky, and being able to essentially snipe out a character, kill off some of the squishier characters in the game, or kill off an injured one if you've got any other precision attacks from earlier, it is really good. Just being able to put that threat of killing off a character onto an enemy unit could deter them from going into your character. Being able to put some pain onto something like a Primarch at the start of the fight phase could be really useful if you really need to take them down in combat. So it is just all round solid for 15 points, I think. It's not one you are going to take all the time, but it definitely does let you make a character of yours turn into this fairly scary, somewhat reliable enemy HQ assassin. The last one is Vengeful Onslaught. This is 10 points, so it's the cheapest of the bunch, but it is actually still okay. When the bearer is destroyed, until the end of your next turn, you get +1 to hit rolls for any friendly Death Company models. So your character does have to die, which obviously sucks, but then getting potentially army-wide +1 to hit is absolutely brilliant. It can let you do a huge revenge counterpunch into the enemy, and for just 10 points, it allows you to make a character that can be a bit more aggressive than you would like, a character that you know is probably going to die, but you can use them almost as a sacrificial unit to unlock that one turn of monumental damage output on the rest of your army. On the stratagem front, we of course get Armor of Contempt. Who would have guessed? We'll check that one off straight away. The first unique stratagem in this detachment is Glorious Sacrifice, which is in any phase on a Death Company unit that was destroyed whilst in range of an objective. This allows you to sticky that objective even though your unit has died, so you can keep hold of it until the enemy controls it. It's just a really nice way to make sure you keep scoring points even if the enemy is trying to shoot a unit off of one of your backfield objectives. So in an army like this where you are going to be wanting to get up the board quickly and not have too many units back holding an objective, this can be really good in this detachment. Furious Onslaught is in the fight phase just before a Death Company unit piles in. It allows your unit to move d3 plus 3 inches instead of just 3 inches. And if they are within 12 inches of a chaplain, they can move a flat 6 inches. So giving you a load more distance to get more models into melee or potentially catch out another enemy unit that thought they were far enough away to not get caught in melee, or just to move a bit further to get some better positioning. It is very, very good for one command point. Even getting d3 plus 3 inches is fairly strong, but the guaranteed flat 6 inches when you're near a chaplain just makes it incredible for an army that wants to be in combat as much as yours does. Next up we have Lost to Rage. This is also done in the fight phase, again on any Death Company unit. This is put on a unit that is below starting strength, and they get to improve their attacks, strength and AP of their melee weapons by 1. Now they do also get hazardous on their melee weapons unless they are within 12 inches of a chaplain. So that does have a downside to it, but it's one you can fairly easily get around most of the time, because in this army you are almost always going to have a few chaplains around. And so in those situations, it is just a nice flat buff, giving you some more attacks, some easier wounding, and then cutting through more of the enemy's armor is just an all-round solid set of bonuses for one command point. So very easy to get around the downsides of this one, and it is just going to be a flat buff to most of your units when you need to kill off a slightly tougher enemy. We've got another fight phase stratagem now in Final Retribution. This one is done just after an enemy unit has picked targets. You can choose a Death Company unit that was chosen as a target, and they get a fight on death mechanic. It goes off on a 4+ with +1 to the result if a chaplain is within 12 inches. So essentially, with a chaplain nearby, you are getting to fight on a 3+ before your model is removed when it's destroyed. So it's not quite as good as fights first, I don't think, most of the time, but it is still a very good way to punish an enemy unit that has charged into you and was trying to wipe your unit out before you could swing back into them. It's fairly good. You've got a lot of attacks on most of your Death Company units, so they are going to get some good damage back, and being on a 3+ does make it pretty reliable when you're near a chaplain, so it is just an all-round really good defensive and offensive stratagem. Your final strat is Wrathful Rampage. It's another super good one for the Blood Angels, giving you the ability to charge after you've advanced. You also get a cheeky bonus in that if you are within 12 inches of a chaplain, you can also shoot after advancing, which is nothing amazing on your Death Company units, but it's a nice cherry on top, I suppose. The real meat of this is getting a scary melee unit that can move up the board, advance, and then still charge into combat, which for one command point is just going to get so much use in this army and this detachment. It's just a very solid addition to the Lost Brethren. If instead you don't want the Death Company, but you instead want the glorious golden host of angels, the Angelic host brings a fantastic rule in Upon Wings of Fire. This allows a number of jump pack units at the end of your opponent's turn to go back into strategic reserves, ready to deep strike back onto the board in your following movement phase. It's 1 unit in an incursion game, 2 in a strike force, and 3 in an onslaught. So basically giving you some very good uppy-downy mechanics to let you zip around the board to get onto objectives more easily, threaten the enemy backfield, or just put a load of pressure onto some key enemy units. It is really good, and it's a very strong utilitarian mobility rule for your Blood Angels. The enhancements for this detachment also support this style of play with Artisan of War up first. It's a 20.1 and it gives the bearer +1 armor penetration on their weapons and also a 2-up save. It can only go on a jump pack character, which all of these enhancements can, but getting a 2-up save, a 4-up invuln, and then potentially something like a -3 AP relic weapon or Thunderhammer is very, very good. And for 20 points, I think it's definitely not a bad pick if you have a character that you want to be a bit more durable and just a bit killier. Visage of Death is 15 points. This one to me is a bit meh. It forces a battle shock test on each enemy unit within engagement range of the bearer. It is done in the opponent's command phase, so that is quite nice. It can potentially stop them holding an objective they thought they were on or interact with some stratagem use for their turn. It is just got a few issues in that it doesn't impact vehicles or monsters, and as always, Battle Shock is just a bit of an unreliable mechanic. So it's not an awful enhancement, I don't think. It does have some use, and it could be, in some cases, it could be game-changing, but I just think it's unreliable. So I would only really be throwing this on if you had a spare 15 points and you just wanted to run the roulette wheel of trying to interact with enemies' objective scoring every now and then. So it's not amazing, probably wouldn't be my first choice though. Instead, for 15 points, you can take the Archangel's Shard. This gives the bearer the anti-chaos 5+ rule and Lance. Now obviously this is very, very, very situational. If you're up against chaos, wonderful. If not, or you're at a tournament so you don't know what you're going to be up against, very much less good. But Lance is still a great rule to have on a Blood Angel character. Maybe not 15 points good, but it still will let you punch up quite well into anything from infantry to elites to vehicles. The thing about this is, if you know you're going up against chaos, or when you do go up against chaos, it can be worth taking, because it will make taking out things like Hellbrutes or bigger, scarier tanks and vehicles just that much easier, because instead of wounding on 6s, you will now be wounding on 5 against those really tough targets. Gleaming Pinions is your last enhancement in this detachment. For 25 points, it allows you the option to, once per turn, after an enemy unit ends a normal, advance, or fallback move within 9 inches of the bearer's unit can make a normal 6-inch move. So you can either back up to make a charge harder or get out of charge range, or if they've fallen back, you can chase them down to keep that threat up on them, or you can just use it to get behind some cover or onto an objective that you didn't quite reach in your last turn. It's fairly solid. 25 points isn't cheap, don't get me wrong, but as we all know, movement is king in 40k, and especially in this detachment, and it will definitely help improve your already good mobility. Guess what, guys? You also get Armor of Contempt in this detachment. Who would have thought? In other news, we also have 5 new unique 1 command point stratagems to look through here, with Unbridled Ardor up first. This one can be used on a unit from your army that has been destroyed in any phase, and it allows a friendly Sanguinary Guard unit for the rest of the battle to re-roll hit and wound rolls against the unit that destroyed yours. So getting you some truly terrifying output from your golden boys and get vengeance against that enemy unit is really good, because it essentially gives you a second, slightly better Oath of Moment target for your Sanguinary Guard to go down and hunt after, even if the rest of your army is going after a different target as the Oath target. So it is just really, really good for 1 command point, I think. Martial Exemplars is in the fight phase. This one gives a unit lethal hits and precision on their melee weapons, so turning a jump pack unit into brilliant little character assassins, making them very reliable at going after HQs that may be hidden in an enemy squad. You know, being able to target them out with precision and then having lethal hits making you much more reliable at getting those wounds through means that even something like jump pack intercessors can actually quite feasibly threaten and kill enemy characters that thought they were safe. We've got a mobility trick next in Descent of Angels. This is in your movement phase. It allows a jump pack unit arriving by deep strike to set up 6 inches away from enemies rather than the usual 9 inches. Now you can't charge after this, of course, but being able to get a bit closer to an enemy unit to block them in or threaten an objective or just to squeeze in a gap they thought they had screened out is very strong. It can definitely help to keep a unit of yours safe if you didn't want them getting charged, or just put the enemy on the back foot a bit if they weren't expecting one of your units to be quite so close for them. Next up we have Angel Sacrifice. This is a great way to protect an important unit or character. You put this on a jump pack unit at the start of the fight phase, and then an enemy model in engagement range of your unit that you chose, when they choose targets to fight, they have to pick your jump pack unit that you put the stratagem on. So even if you have another unit or character in that same combat, they are going to be safe from those enemy attacks. It means that you are going to have a unit that is going to be much more likely to survive, to swing back, and it means that something like a cheaper jump intercessor unit can take the hit, so that your Sanguinary Guard with Dante in, for instance, can survive to swing back even harder into that enemy unit. The final stratagem is Death from the Skies. This is also put onto a jump pack unit that has advanced or fallen back. They can still declare a charge. So it is, like we've seen in the other 2 detachments, just another really good advance and charge stratagem. It's brilliant as always for the Blood Angels. You need that mobility, you need that extra range on your charge radius, and it is just going to make your unit more reliable at getting into those combats where you really want them to be. The last detachment is the new Grotmus one, the Angelic Inheritors. This one we actually did already do a video on, which I will link down in the description below, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because we did cover it there. I think overall it's a fairly solid detachment. It allows you a pick of 3 different abilities that you give to your character units, so any unit that has a character with it, you can give them 2 of 3 options, either fall back and charge, reroll hit and wound rolls of 1, or reroll advance and charge rolls. So they're all fairly decent buffs. It can give you a bit more output, a bit more reliability in your charges, and just some extra mobility. You can also give a unit some extra bonus movement with a 6-inch scout move thanks to Prescient Flash, which is an enhancement, or just make sure you actually survive the journey up the board by turning off enemy overwatch on the bearer's unit thanks to Blazing Icon. I think there is a big downside to this detachment in that whilst it does have a lot of good power and utility in its enhancements and stratagems, what it doesn't have is an advance and charge strat, which the other 3 detachments do, and they are so useful in them. So whilst you do get some really good strats like Focused Fury, which means a character unit potentially gets lance and lethal hits, and then on top of that potentially re-rolling hit and wound rolls of 1 from your detachment rule, so you can make some terrifyingly good units, or you can get some really good defenses with things like In the Shadow of Great Wings, which means a unit can be untargetable outside of 18 inches. So there is a lot of power here, don't get me wrong. I'm just not sure it's enough to warrant picking over one of the other 3 where you do get a load of power in themselves, but you also get that advance and charge stratagem, which is just so strong. This new stratagem definitely has teeth. It's got a good mixture of defense, offense, and mobility. I just think if you choose it over the other 3, there will be times in the game where you miss having advance and charge for a cheap 1 command point. But now we move on to the actual units in the Codex. Starting off, of course, is one of my favorite models in the range, which is Astorath. Astorath is 105 points. He's got a brilliant 12-inch move to get around the board. He is toughness 4 with a 5 wound profile, a 2-up save, and a 4-up invuln. So pretty standard fare for Marines. His weapon is the Executioner's Axe, which I think is incredibly strong. 6 attacks at strength 7, minus 3 AP and 2 damage, with precision and devastating wounds. So he is fantastic at killing characters, and he can potentially, in the Liberator assault group, go up to strength 9 with 7 attacks, so he is really reliable at killing characters too. On top of that, he also acts as a very good force multiplier for a unit of Jump Pack Death Company, which is what he can join. He's got 2 rules that buff them. The first is Redeemer of the Lost, which gives them a 4-up fight on death, so letting them get some swings in even as they get cut down in combat. And then Massive Doom gives his unit devastating wounds after they've charged, which doesn't help him directly, of course, because he already has that, but all of those attacks from your Death Company can now be potentially ignoring armor and invuln saves, and this is just going to make them so much scarier into anything from Marines to tanks to Terminators to Custodes. It just massively boosts their output. So I think he's very good for 105 points, and I think if you are running Death Company, maybe not even the Death Company detachment, if you are just running any Death Company units, especially the ones with jump packs, which is the ones he can join, if you are running those, he is probably an auto-include, I would say. The only real competition he has is obviously from Lemartes, who also adds a lot to Death Company units. The Baal Predator is still an option for you to take, which is nice. It's the standard toughness 10, 11 wound, 3-up save profile. It costs you 135 points, and it also gets to reroll advance rolls with its overcharged engines. Instead of the regular Predator turret, the Baal gets a twin assault cannon for 6 strength 6, no AP, 1 damage shots with twin linked and devastating wounds. It does also have assault, so it can potentially move 18 inches and still shoot, which is fairly nice. Instead of that though, you can take the Flamestorm cannon. This is D6 plus 3 shots, strength 6, minus 2 AP, 2 damage, and they have auto hits with torrent, ignore cover, and an 18-inch range. So it's not actually a bad Marine killing profile. It'll average about 3 dead Marines in the shooting phase, so it can likely kill off a 5-man unit with the extra Stormbolter and Heavy Bolter shots that you can throw at them. Generally nothing spectacular. There are definitely some better vehicle options in the main Marine Codex, but if you wanted to be a Blood Angel purist and go for a really fluffy, thematic, lore-accurate army, the Baal Predator does add some anti-infantry punch to an army. One of the most terrifying characters in the game is the ever popular Mephiston, the chief librarian of the Blood Angels. He is a hefty 135 points, which is pricier than some other marine characters, but he does have the stats to back that up. A base 7-inch move, toughness 5, 2-up save, 5-up invuln, and a 4-up feel no pain makes him incredibly difficult to put down. And it's made even harder to do so because he is also a lone operative, so he can't even be targeted until he gets really close. He also has fights first, so you can't really shoot him until he gets close, and then when he does get close, if you manage to get a charge off on him, he's still going to get to fight before you do, and then in combat, he is pretty terrifying. His sword is Vitaris. It gets him 6 strength 9, minus 3 AP, D3 damage attacks with lethal hits. D3 damage is a bit annoying because, you're going to roll a 1 when you really don't want a 1, but it's still a very potent profile. He can do a lot of damage to almost anything in the game apart from those really tough vehicles. He's also got some fairly decent shooting. He's got a standard plasma pistol, which is okay, but then Fury of the Ancients is another ranged attack, a psychic ranged attack he has. 3 shots at strength 4, minus 1 AP and D3 damage with sustained hits 1, or you can instead focus it, and then it is strength 5, minus 2 AP, and sustain hits 3. So he can be getting up to 12 hits with this, and it's a pistol, so he can be using it in combat too, and it can actually do a load of damage to something like a toughness 4, 3-up save marine profile. In terms of the abilities he comes with, they help him even more. He's got the Quickening, which grants him Advance and Charge, which is just brilliant on him. He is a character you do want in combat. And then he's also got Transfixing Gaze, which means that when an enemy unit is within 6 inches of him, whenever that unit falls back, they have to take a leadership test, and if they fail, they instead have to remain stationary. So if he does get into combat with a unit that really doesn't want to be there, he can make it incredibly difficult for units to escape him and fall back, so he can lock them down quite well, which makes it bad for them because he's going to kill them, also makes it good for Mephiston because it gives him that protection from any enemy shooting that may be near to him. He can't join units, of course, being a lone operative, so that in some situations can make him a bit more vulnerable, and of course he doesn't have any rules that buff a unit he's with because he can't join any, and that does maybe take a bit of his power away, but I think overall for his cost, he is an excellent solo unit to just rush up the board, threaten a flank, charge in, and pretty much slaughter anything that's in his path. For a bit more of an actual force multiplying character, we do have Commander Dante, the chapter master of the Blood Angels. He's 130 points, so again, he's a little bit of an investment, but he's actually not too bad considering all of the great tools that he brings to your army. He's got a fairly solid jump pack move of 12 inches, he's toughness 4 with 6 wounds, a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln, and he can join the units that you would expect. Jump pack intercessors, vanguard vets with jump packs, and of course his sanguinary guard. And he gives them a very welcome buff with Warden of the Imperium Nihilus, which grants him and his unit +1 to advance and charge rolls, and +1 to hit with their attacks. So with something like an advance and charge stratagem, he is adding 2 inches to your total threat range and making it so that all of your attacks in combat are going to be incredibly accurate, which is brilliant alongside a possible bonus attack and +2 strength if you chose that detachment. He can just make an already killer unit even faster and even more deadly, so he's really, really good. He's also got the Death Mask of Sanguinius, which forces each enemy unit within 6 inches of him at the start of the fight phase to test Battle Shock at -1. So he also potentially has a nice impact, denying some stratagem use if you get lucky. If you manage to get this off on a unit that was planning to interrupt your combat phase, this can be game changing to have because it means that they won't be able to do that, so you don't have to worry about them killing off some of your sanguinary guard before they get to swing. In terms of what he brings in his own output, he's got his Perdition Pistol, which is essentially a melter pistol, strength 9, -4 AP and D6 damage with melter 2. It's only 6-inch range, but it does have sustained hits D3, so he can be getting up to 4 hits with it into an enemy, and being able to use it in melee thanks to it being a pistol means he can actually do quite a bit of work even when he's in combat to things like tougher elites and tanks. His main melee attacks though are in the form of the Axe Mortalis, which is 8 attacks at strength 8, -3 AP and 2 damage and lethal hits. So it's a very good profile. He will on average by himself kill around 5 marines in one go, so he's very, very choppy into infantry, and then having those lethal hits means that even if he's going into some tougher targets like monsters or tanks, he can still do some work into them thanks to that auto wound on 6s. He is just all round a brilliant buffing unit for your forces, and if you've got a unit of Sanguinary Guard or some jump pack intercessors, he is definitely worth taking just to throw in with them. The Death Company Dreadnought is no longer the older, smaller kit. Instead, this is essentially just a Brutalis Dreadnought now. It got a big bump up to toughness 10 and 12 wounds. It still has that solid 2-up save and 6-up feel no pain, so it's actually a fairly durable little menace of a unit. At 180 points, it is 20 points more than the generic Brutalis, but it does get some unique rules to make up for that quite nicely. The Death Company Dreadnought has the Black Rage, which allows it to reroll hit rolls in melee, and also comes with a slight downside in that it is OC0 and also can't fall back unless it's within 12 inches of a chaplain. So that is a downside that all of the Death Company units have with that Black Rage rule. As I said earlier, it's not a huge downside because in this army, if you are running Death Company, you will probably have a chaplain or two in most of your lists, but it is something to just remember just in case you did want this thing going off onto an objective and you didn't have a chaplain nearby to them. It's also got Driven by Fury, which means in the enemy shooting phase, if they get a hit on your Dreadnought, it can make a d6 plus 2-inch move towards the nearest enemy unit. So being able to get potentially an extra 8 inches of movement in the enemy shooting phase is pretty scary. They don't even need to wound you, they just need to get a hit on you, so it can definitely deter an enemy from wanting to shoot at your Dreadnought in case they essentially give you a free movement phase to get into a better position or block a charge they had planned. In terms of his output, he's got some okay shooting. He's got an Icarus Heavy Stubber and then either a Twin Heavy Bolter or a Twin Multi-Melter. Usually I will be going for the Melter if I'm being honest, and then like the Brutalis, he has a choice of Fists or Claws for his melee option. In the case of the Blood Angels, the Blood Fists or the Blood Talons. The Fists only have one profile, but they do come with 4 bolt rifle shots to add some extra shooting to your unit. Instead, if you go for the Talons, they've got the same strike profile as the Fists, strength 12, -2 AP and 3 damage, but then they also get a sweep profile, which is 10 attacks at strength 7, -2 AP and 1 damage with twin linked. So if you think you are going to need to clear out some chaff potentially with this guy, then the Talons will be a better pick. I think in general, the Talons are more useful all round. The extra 4 bolt rifle shots is probably not going to do much in the grand scheme of things, but there will be times when you just want those extra attacks rather than the fewer strike profile version. So in general, I would probably be going for the Talons most of the time. And I think really, it's just a useful distraction Carnifex style unit to have. It is pricey, but it's fairly durable. It can get up into combat very, very quickly if your opponent starts shooting at it. And when it is in combat, it will do a lot of damage. Now we move on to some of the other Death Company units, some of the infantry units. The Codex does have a few variants. First up is the Death Company Marines with bolt rifles, essentially your old Death Company intercessors. 18 points each, either 5 for 90 or 10 for 180. They have a bolt pistol and a bolt rifle, as well as a few options for some more close ranged output. One of them can take a hand flamer, a plasma or infernal pistol. 1 in every 5 can take an eviscerator, and then another 1 in 5 can take a grenade launcher, and then another one can take a chainsword, a power fist, a power weapon, or a thunderhammer. So you can make them a bit more choppy in combat if you want, but in general, they can't go fully melee. They are more of a mixed unit. They are your standard toughness 4, 2 wound, 3-up save. They do get the 6-up feel no pain of the Death Company, which is actually quite handy against any 2 damage attacks going into them. They get the Black Rage, which like we said just now for the Dreadnought, lets them reroll hit rolls in melee, and also has that chaplain requirement if they want to fall back or control any objectives. And then their unique rule is Visions of Heresy, and that means that once per turn they can fire Overwatch or heroically intervene for 0 command points. And when you do either of those, you get to either reroll their hit rolls for Overwatch or reroll their charge roll for the heroic intervention. So it does just make it a little easier for them to get into combat if you heroically intervene, or make it a tiny bit more likely they'll get a hit if you Overwatch. Although to be honest, rerolling Overwatch is a bit pointless because you still need 6s to hit, so it's still fairly bad odds even with a reroll. If instead you want a more purely melee focused Death Company unit, then these guys are up next. They are the same, priced at 18 points per model in either a 5 or a 10-man squad. They have the exact same toughness 4, 2 wound, 3 up save, and 6 up feel no pain. They've got a heavy bolt pistol and an Astartes chainsword instead of their bolt rifle, so these are essentially Death Company Assault Intercessors. 1 in 5 can take an Eviscerator, and 1 can take a Power Fist, Thunderhammer, or Power Weapon, so they are just much better at moving up and charging into combat. The Black Rage, of course, does help them a lot with those rerolls to hit in melee with all of those chainsword attacks, and a unit of 5 can be throwing out 12 strength 4, 3 strength 7, and 3 strength 8 attacks with rerolls to hit, which isn't an awful bit of output for 90 points. They also get the rule An Honourable Death in Combat, which grants them sustained hits 1 if they're below starting strength. That obviously boosts their damage even further, and then if they are below half strength, they get sustained hits 2. So if you kill off a few of the regular chainsword dudes as you take damage, by the time you just get to the 2 with Eviscerators and 1 with a Thunderhammer out of a 10-man unit, they can be getting a load of hits with those sustained, and they can actually still punch up pretty well into most targets, even if they've only got a few models left. Finally, for the Death Company Marines, the Jump Pack Intercessor equivalents are here too. These are a bit pricier. They're 130 points for 5 or 240 points for 10, so 24 points per model. They gain the boosted 12-inch move as well as the fly keyword, of course, and then a chaplain unit that can attach to assault intercessors with jump packs can join these guys as a leader, so that will be things like Lemartes or Astorath. And then like above, they are more melee focused, with an Astartes chainsword and a heavy bolt pistol each. They can take the same 1 in 5 and an Eviscerator, and then 1 in 5 can also swap their weapons for a hand flamer, an Inferno pistol, or a plasma pistol, and also a Power Fist or Power Weapon, so you can actually get a bit more damage output from this unit compared to the others. A unit of 10 of them can have 2 Eviscerators and 2 Power Fists, so that can be fairly scary. They likewise get the reroll hit rolls with the Black Rage, but their unique rule is Savage Fury. This gives them a reroll charge rolls, so potentially a 12-inch move, a d6 advance with the right stratagem, and then still being able to charge with a reroll means they are very capable of making a big charge, getting into combat turn 1 if you need them to, so they are really good. They are a bit expensive at 240 points for 10, but they can do a lot of work if they need to. They can absolutely force the enemy onto the back foot very early on if you give them the chance to, and where you can really help them with this is Lemartes, because you're not done with the Death Company just yet. Lemartes is next, and he is brilliant. 110 points gets you a 12-inch move, toughness 4, 3 up save, 4 up invuln, 4 wound HQ, who can join Death Company Marines with jump packs. He's got that usual 6 up feel no pain, and he buffs his unit a lot. He gives them not only lethal hits, thanks to Fury Unbound, which makes those Death Company Marines really scary if they get that turn 1 charge off, but then he also boosts their durability too. Guardian of the Lost gives them a flat -1 to incoming damage. So any 2 damage attacks going into them, which are usually great into Marines, are now half as effective, and even the 3 damage attacks will now be dropping to 2 damage, and with your 6 up feel no pain, you now have a much better chance of saving a model, because on 2 dice you just need to roll 1 6, and your model won't die, you'll just lose a wound. So it does give you, you're not reliably going to do it, but it gives you a much better chance of surviving even those 3 damage attacks with Lemartes in your unit. It's just a pair of really strong rules to help boost your output and your defensives, and I think if you are bringing Jump Pack Death Company, he is, like Astorath, I would say an auto include. You have to weigh up whether you want one or the other if you are bringing just one unit of Death Company with jump packs, but they both bring so much for their unit. His own output isn't awful either. The Blood Crozius is 5 attacks, strength 6, -2 AP and 2 damage with a lethal hit, so he can do a good bit of work himself. And then of course he gets to reroll hit rolls and charge rolls when he is with Death Company Marines, as well as getting that -1 to incoming damage with any precision attacks that are going into him, thanks to his own rules. So despite only having 4 wounds, which looks a little bit flimsy at first, he can be deceptively durable. He is brilliant. He's just a almost mandatory pick in my opinion if you are running a lot of Death Company, especially those with jump packs. But from the Death Company, we move on to the Shining Glorious Sanguinary Guard. These come in a unit of 3 or 6 for either 130 or 260 points, so they are quite pricey, just over 43 points per model, but they are very, very good. A 12-inch move, toughness 4 and 3 wounds is great. They keep their old 2-up save to help them survive sort of that lower level, low strength, no AP firepower quite well. They do also have a fantastic 4-up invuln now to help protect them against any really scary weapons, and they can also do some very good damage in melee with their choice of an Encarmine Blade or an Encarmine Spear. On top of that, they do get some token shooting with their Angelus bolt guns, 2 shots, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage, which is pretty meh, but they are pistols, so it's not much, but you can shoot them in combat to help boost their output even more, even if they are getting stuck in melee. With their melee weapons, they get 4 strength 6, minus 3 AP, 2 damage swings with the blade, or if you go for the spear, it's only 3 attacks, a strength 6, minus 2 AP and 2 damage, but it has lance. So on the charge, you can be wounding those tougher targets on 4s rather than 5s, and into Marines, you will be wounding on 2s rather than 3s, so it can be a fairly nice addition. A unit of 3 of these will kill around 4.4 Marines with the blades, whilst on the charge, the spears kill around 3.3. So sometimes weight of dice does just make the blades a bit better, but it does start to balance out a bit against those tougher monsters and vehicles. And of course, anything with a 4-up invulnerable save, the extra AP on the sword is wasted. So they do both have their uses. There are targets that both will be better into, but overall they're fairly close in terms of output. So it kind of depends just how much you are going to be charging these guys and just what you are going to be aiming them at. They get 2 very strong defensive rules on their datasheet. They get Angelic Visage, which makes them -1 to be hit in melee, which is an incredible boost to their durability all by itself. But then they also get Heirs of Askelon, which means when a character is leading the unit, that can be either Dante or a captain with a jump pack, they also get -1 to be wounded. So a unit of 6 with Dante can be sitting on a 2-up save, 4-up invuln, -1 to be hit, and -1 to be wounded. And that just makes almost everything bounce right off them. An entire 10-man Terminator squad with Power Fists will only get around 5 unsaved wounds into your Sanguinary Guard, and at 2 damage each, that will only kill 2 Sanguinary Guard off. And leave 1 alive on 1 wound. So they are incredibly good with a character joining them. They are fast, they are super durable, and they are very, very killy, which does make them just a fairly expensive, but definitely worthwhile addition to your army. The Sanguinary Priests are also a thing in the new Codex. Like other minor HQs, he can join a unit even if a captain, a chapter master, or a lieutenant unit has already joined them, which is good because he brings his unit of 5-up Feel No Pain, which can turn something like Assault Intercessors or Stern Guard into very durable bricks. He also gives his unit +1 AP on their melee weapons with his Blood Chalice, so getting -2 AP on all those chainswords and bumping something like your captain's Power Fist up to -3 AP does give it a huge boost for going into Marines. Now he is 90 points, so he definitely isn't cheap, and he doesn't really add much else in terms of his own output, but if you want to make a unit that bit killier, as well as a bit more durable with that Feel No Pain, he's definitely a option to consider. I would say he's overall best in something like Assault Intercessors, because they will really like that Feel No Pain as they're moving up the board, and it is the only unit he can join really that wants that extra pip of AP on their melee weapons. Now we've already covered the next guy in the Codex in another video, but he's good so we'll do it again. The Sanguinor is also in the Codex. He's a fairly hefty 140 points, so we do need him to really pull his weight, but luckily he can actually do that. He's a lone operative, so we can't join any units, but he is hard to take down until he gets close, and with fights first like Mephiston, he can fly around, be fairly safe from shooting, as well as being a fairly scary prospect for the enemy to try and charge to take out. With a 12-inch move, 7 wounds, toughness 4 and a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln, he actually will also take a little bit for your enemy to chew through with that good number of wounds, but his real trick is Miraculous Saviour. This allows him, once per battle at the end of the enemy charge phase, to deep strike onto the board if he's in reserve, and he can deep strike into engagement range of an enemy unit that's charged. So he can just drop in, and with fights first, he will be swinging before them, so dropping right into an enemy unit that's charged that was about to go in and start fighting your unit, and you get to surprise Sanguinor and then fight first. And with his melee profile, he's got 8 attacks, strength 6, -3, 2 damage with devastating wounds, so he can actually put quite a lot of work into most targets, and in some cases he can absolutely destroy a unit, or at the very least blunt its output enough so that the unit your opponent had charged doesn't have to worry about being wiped out now. He's also got an aura in the Aura of Fervor, which grants a reroll to battle shock and leadership tests for friendly Astartes units within 6 inches of him. It is nice, and that can definitely help keep a unit, from being battle shocked when you really don't want them to, but his main niche for me is keeping him in reserve and then just threatening any enemy charges with that brilliant countercharge style rule in Miraculous Savior. There are also some brand new unique HQ options for the Blood Angels as we moved from the Index to the Codex. The Blood Angels Captain comes in at 80 points and gets you Toughness 4, 5 Wound HQ with the standard 2-up save, 4-up invuln. Like all captains, he has Rights of Battle to let you reduce the command point cost of a stratagem by 1 once per battle round. So that does make him pretty invaluable in a lot of units to get the most out of the great stratagems in whatever detachment you're in. Being able to join Assault Intercessors can help make them do a bit more work into a lot of targets with the strats that you have on offer. What he can't do is join Blade Guard, which is a shame. So if you did want to bring Blade Guard and have a captain with them, might be better to just take the regular captain from the main codex if you wanted to do that. The only other real difference between the Blood Angel captain and the regular one is that he can take an Inferno pistol and he can't take the Relic Shield, which is what you need to join Blade Guard. So it kind of depends what you want to join him to, but if you are running Blade Guard and you want a character with them, you don't want this guy, you just want the regular Space Marine captain. There's also a couple of unique Death Company captains, either with or without a jump pack. The regular one is 70 points, he can join your non-jump pack Death Company units, so the ones with or without bolt rifles. He grants his unit a 6-inch scout move, which can help them just get up the board a little bit better, even though they don't have those jump packs, so they can hit combat as soon as possible. He also has the same Black Rage rerolls and comes with the Death Vision of Sanguinius. This essentially lets him explode when he dies, so when he's destroyed you roll a dice and you add 2 to the roll if the enemy unit has the enemy warlord in, and on a 2 to 3 the enemy takes D3 mortals, on a 4 to 5 they take 3, and on a 6+ they take D3 plus 3. So you can do up to 6 mortals to an enemy unit that kills this guy, which is pretty good considering you can get it going off on a 4+, and it can definitely make your other Death Company units feel a bit more impactful in the game, especially the Assault Intercessor version of the squad. The Jump Pack version can of course join the Jump Pack Death Company unit. He is a bit pricier at 85 points, but he does have obviously the better movement. He grants his unit Sustained Hits 1, which can be a big boost with their already relatively good weight of dice profiles. Again, he's got the Black Rage for the rerolls, and he has the same exploding rule with the Death Vision of Sanguinius. So if you didn't want to bring Lemartes or Astorath, or you wanted a third unit of Jump Pack Death Company, he could be worthwhile just to get even more out of their melee. But I would say in general, neither of these are must-takes. I think the Blood Angels have enough good named characters that you can lead most of your units with them for, yes, a tiny bit more points-wise, but generally with a much better set of buffs and rules that they bring. So I think these two, they're cheaper picks if you really wanted to save points, or if you wanted a particular enhancement from a detachment, you could go for one of these. But certainly for the jump pack version, I would be looking at Lemartes and Astorath before I even considered bringing this guy. So if you've only got 2 units of the jump pack Death Company, you're probably never going to use this guy because Lemartes and Astorath just do even more for them. And that is the might of the Blood Angels. They're not a chapter I have to admit I know all that well, but I have always loved them. I've loved their very fast melee focused playstyle. I think they've got 4 very good solid detachments that let you run either this more generalist army or a specific Death Company focused one, or one that is more character heavy. They've got some really cool and interesting stratagems and abilities to use. Their characters across the board are all great from a lore and a gameplay perspective, and whilst I think it's sad they don't have some of their more iconic units like Corbulo or Tycho or the Librarian Dreadnought, they still have enough character and identity to make them a really unique and enjoyable faction to play. But as always, I'd love to know what you think of the Blood Angels and which of their detachments is your favourite to use out of the 4. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.